Hey everyone, and welcome back to another tutorial. We're going to be painting 3 different Christmas ornaments that our Project of the Month subscribers received for their Christmas in July boxes. The first set is going to be the Santa boots, then we have Santa with some glasses, and then a little palette tag with a Santa hat. First thing we're going to do is going to take some of our painter's tape and rip off a piece, and then what you're going to do is roll each of the ends so that it is sticky side up, and stick the ends to your table. That way you have a piece of tape for all of your little pieces to attach to so you're not chasing them everywhere. Some of the colors we're going to be using for today is Dixie Belle's Cotton, Pine Cone, Caviar, Barn Red, Kudzu, and I'm actually going to add in another one that is a custom mix for his flesh. Another product we're going to be using is the Dixie Belle Shine in Gold, a little bit of fine white glitter, and the Dixie Belle Stick With Me glue. And then the first glue I showed you was the Gorilla Glue, which is a super glue we're going to use to attach everything. You're also going to probably want some Posca paint pens, and extra fine, and a sponge for your painting. I'm going to sort apart all of my pieces by color. First ones I'm going to be working on here are the berries and the hats that are going to be painted Dixie Belle Barn Red. Once I have my red ready, we are going to use the sponge. Use the fat part of your sponge, dab into the paint, and then sponge straight up and down, dabbing the paint onto your pieces. You may decide that you want 2 coats. This paint dries fairly quickly, so once your paint is dry, you can go back through and do a second coat as well. For this part, we're just going to be doing the top half, because that's where his hat's going to be. And in the video, I missed a part going down towards the little poof ball of his hat. So you're just going to want to make sure that you paint that part as well. You'll notice in a little bit that I missed painting that part on this hat here. Once you've finished with your red, you're going to want to go ahead and grab a pair of scissors and just cut off the end of the sponge, giving you a nice blank sponge for your next color. Moving on to the green, we're going to go ahead and move off all of the pieces that we are done painting. They should be dry by now. And we're going to add the pieces that are going to be green to our tape and go ahead and paint them green in the same way that we did the red. And once we're done with all of our green, we're going to go ahead and move all of the pieces off of the tape so we can move on to our next pieces. Next, what we're going to do is going to be our pine cone brown. So with this brown, I wanted it to be a little bit of a stain instead of a paint. You're more than welcome to use it as a paint. If you decide to do that, it'll be the same method as we've been doing with green and red. But if you want to make it more of a stain, what we're going to do is take a paintbrush, and you're going to dip it into your water just a little bit. A little bit goes a long way. So just a little bit in your water, and then dip it into your paint, and then go directly onto your piece of wood. What that's going to do is going to thin out the paint so that it looks more like a stain instead of an actual paint. The darker you want it, the less water you use. The lighter you want it, the little bit more water you use, or you can use a paper towel to wipe off any excess and go from there. Once you're happy with the way that your brown looks, we're going to go ahead and move on to the black pieces. So black I'm going to do is for the boots and the tips of the boots. And then it's also going to be that long rectangle which has the word Jolly attached to it. That will also be black. And then I had decided to make Santa's glasses black as well. Making sure to cut the tip off of your sponge. We're going to go ahead and start using our sponge for the black. For the bigger areas, if you wanted to use a paintbrush, you could. I find it's just as easy to keep using the sponge for everything though. Once you've finished with all of your black pieces, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next one. So I'm going to cut off the tip again. And now I'm going to work on the white pieces. So white is going to be, I decided to do the jolly, his mustache, it's going to be his beard, any of the fur pieces for the hats. And actually, I just forgot that I needed to paint that piece black as well. So I'm just grabbing a paintbrush and finishing up the black on that before I move on to the white. Okay, now that we are done with the black, washing on my paintbrush, we are going to move on to the white pieces. So white pieces are going to be his mustache, his beard, the two white pieces for his hat, the two fur pieces on the top of his boots, the word jolly, and then that funky little piece above his mustache is going to be, it's actually his eyebrows and his nose. So I'm only going to paint the part that has his eyebrows on it. And then I'm also going to paint that little lace part that goes on the bottom of the palette tag ornament. When painting pieces that have the score lines on it for some extra definition, you want to make sure you don't have too much paint on your sponge or you're going to end up filling in those lines. So less is more for those. Next is going to be the peach, which is going to be for his nose and for his face. Just need a little dollop of that. And I believe that should be all of the pieces that need to get painted. So I'm going to put my paint off to the side. And then if you had ordered the Project of the Month box, I did include the Stick With Me glue. That is going to be in a little paint pot for you. And this is very much a little bit goes a long way. You're going to want to use just a very, very thin layer of the glue and any of the pieces that you want to use, either the glitter that came with your kit or even the Dixie Shine Gold that came with it. So this comes out as a white glue, and I'm going to use just a tiny, tiny bit on my sponge. And I'm going to dab straight up and down on the pieces that I want to add the glitter and the shine to. So I decided to add glitter to the fur parts of the hats, to the word jolly, and then I'm going to add the Dixie Shine Gold to the buckles that are going to go onto his boots. Again, just a very, very, very thin layer because we want this to dry quickly and evenly. Once it's dry, it'll be tacky, and that's what you're going to use to stick the glitter and the shine to. For the buckles, I decided not to do any color underneath, so those are just the bare wood. Putting the glue right on top, dabbing very lightly so I don't have too much excess glue. Once you're done with your glue, you're going to want to let that dry. The instructions say to let it dry about 15 minutes. I did have a fan going above me when I was painting this, so it didn't take quite 15 minutes for it to dry. But once it's dry, that's when you can work with it to put your glitter and your shine on. So while I'm waiting, I am using an extra fine Posca black paint pen, and I'm just going to use that for to color in Santa's eyes. If you don't have an extra fine black paint pen, you can always use the reverse end of a paintbrush and just kind of paint, I guess, with that end of the paintbrush, and it gives you cleaner lines to stay within the lines for his eyeballs. And while I'm waiting for the glue to dry, I figured I'd go ahead and start working on my accent lines and all of my other pieces. So this is going to be an extra fine white Posca paint pen, just drawing some lines following the contour of the parts of the hats, the boots, and stuff like that. Another thing to add a little extra to your pieces can actually be to use a little tiny bit of white on your sponge. If you think you have enough paint on your sponge, you have too much paint on your sponge for this next step. So I'm just going to put a tiny bit of white on my sponge, and I'm going to dab most of it off in my paint tray. And then I'm just going to run it along the edges of some of my pieces just to give them a little bit more of a definition. Once I'm done adding some definition to my pieces, I'm going to go back and finish up my white paint pen accent lines. I'm just adding a little bit of pizzazz to them, giving them some highlights. Every once in a while, a piece can break off from your kit. We try to inspect them before they go out, but wood is wood and does what it wants sometimes. So all I do is just take a little bit of my Gorilla Super Glue, and I'm just going to add it to the edge of my broken piece and attach it back onto the piece where it's supposed to be. The main thing with this is to make sure you don't have any of the super glue oozing out on the bottom onto your table, because you will end up gluing your piece to the table. Once I'm finished with all of the accent lines on my pieces, I am going to just kind of stack them up, make sure everything is painted the way it should be before I move on to the next step, and make sure all of my pieces are ready to go. Next, I'm going to use the gold foil that, if you're a Project of the Month subscriber, came with your box. And all I'm going to do is stick it down onto my belt buckle pieces, my shoe buckles, so that is dull side down and shiny side up. And as you can see, it sticks to the glue that was there because it was tacky, and just leaves a nice gold shine to those buckles. Pull it off nice and slow, and there you have it. You have nice gold buckles without using any paint. Next part is to move on to the glitter part, and I'm going to use just a plain piece of copy paper to put down so I can catch any of my excess glitter. And I'm just going to sprinkle glitter over top of the pieces that had the Stick With Me glue on it that I wanted to glitterize. You're always more than welcome to glitter as many of the pieces as you want. Just note that you'd have to put more glue on the other pieces. Tap off the excess glitter, and then you can fold your piece of paper in half and put it back into your glitter container to save for another project. Once you're done with all of your pieces and you're happy with the way that they look, we can start with the assembly of them. Using our Gorilla Super Glue, I'm just going to put little tiny dabs where the pieces are going to be attached to the top. Starting with the boots, just going to add a couple dabs, lining up all of the bottom so that it's flush and everything fits correctly. When I attached the fur piece on the left-hand side to the top of my boot, I do believe I actually had the wrong piece. I think that was supposed to be the right side piece because my right side piece is now not fitting correctly. My left side was already attached, so not a whole lot I can do about it. So I'm just trying to make the right side as close as possible. And then from there, I'm going to just add in a little bit of black. As you can see, I'm trying to pull off the left piece and it is not budging. So what I do is I just add a little black to cover any gaps, and it's close enough and nobody's really going to notice. Using my black paint pen to color in the loop on the boots and then color in any of the wood that is showing from my mismatched piece. If you don't have the black paint pen, you can always do this with a little paintbrush with a little bit of black paint as well. Black paint is also good for painting along the edges. If you get a little crazy with your paint and you notice if you turn your project to the side, you see a lot of paint on the side, you can always use a black paint pen or some black paint to cover up the little oopsies. Going to use my gold buckles with just a tiny bit of glue on the back side to attach them onto the straps on the boots. Putting the boots off to the side, I'm going to work on the next part, which is going to be the little palette tag. And as you can see, I am missing a little bit of red paint on my hat, but in this video, I don't notice it until I've already started gluing pieces on. So I just take a little paintbrush with some red paint to cover that up. Once I'm finished with that one, I'm going to go ahead and move on to my Santa, starting with the back piece and adding and working my way forward just like we did for the others. So I'm going to add on to his beard and then make sure that there's glue behind his face, and then you add on his little face. And in this video, you're going to notice I put on the mustache and then I try to add on the glasses, or his nose and his eyebrows before I add on the part of his hat. So just make sure you do the white part of his hat before you start adding on all of those pieces. From here, the Project of the Month boxes included some black and white checkered ribbon. You can either use that or you can use some twine or whatever you may have. And I am just going to make a little bow out of it. I'm going to struggle making the bow because of the Band-Aid on my thumb, so I'm going to speed this process up just a little bit because it's quite painful to watch. And phew, got through that. That was quite difficult with the Band-Aid on my thumb. And then I'm just going to cut another piece of ribbon, and this is going to be the part that actually hangs the ornament itself. So I'm going to just put a knot in the end with the two tails, and then from there I feed the non-knotted end through the hole on Santa. And I used the end of a paintbrush to help me try to feed it through because my ribbon was a little bit too thick. And then loop it through, and that's how I hang all of my ornaments. From here, I was kind of looking to see if I liked Santa to have a bow or not. I decided eventually that I do not want Santa to have the bow, so I didn't end up gluing it on, and I just left him with the black and white plaid ribbon as his little hanger. Then I'm going to go ahead and cut some more ribbon to do the rest of the ornaments, and then I end up cutting enough ribbon to do another bow as well. I do end up putting bows on the other two. So here I'm just tying the loop in the end of the hanger, and then I'm going to add it to the other two ornaments. And I decided to use the bow that I already created. I'm going to put it on this little palette tag. So I just used a little bit of the super glue, and I'm going to add the bows directly onto the ribbon onto the ornament. So how I make my bow is I'm going to kind of find the middle of the ribbon. This one goes by a little bit easier, so I will do a little bit of an explanation while I'm doing it. So I'm going to find the middle of my ribbon and then make 2 loops with my fingers, cross them, and put it through the little hole. And while holding on to that and holding on to the other loop, gently tugging a little bit, and I'm going to flip that tail to the front. And then just keep tugging on the ribbon until my loops are about the same size. Don't really worry about too much if the tails are not the same size, as we can always trim them when we're done. But as long as the loops are the same size and they have a look that you like. And when you just can't get the look that you like, you untie it and try again, which is what I'm going to do here. Once I finally got my ribbon the way I wanted to, my little bow, I am going to trim off the tails and I'm going to cut them at an angle. Just give them a little bit of decoration, like the bows you'd see at Christmas time. And I'm just going to add a dab of super glue to attach the bow to my hanger, right on the where it loops and attaches with to the ornament itself. So making sure there's lots of glue there. And I don't want my finger to stick to it, so I'm going to use the end of a paintbrush to hold it down. Sometimes the glue can seep through the fabric of the ribbon, so I always try not to use my finger to hold them down. Once you have your ribbons attached, if you decide that you want to trim up the tails a little bit more, you can always do that as well. I decided that these tails were still just a smidge bit too long, so I trimmed them up just a little bit. And there you have 3 cute little ornaments, perfect for Christmas. A little bit of glitter, a little bit of metallic sheen, add a little pizzazz to them. Thanks for joining me for another tutorial, and I hope to have some more coming soon in the future. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at The Wandering Goose of Holland and on Instagram as well.